All right. Yeah, so excited to have our next presenter, Jordan, with Leyline coming up and telling everyone, how your new platform is a game changer in the supply chain and automation space.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me, everybody, and thanks for taking your time. I'm going to talk a little bit about Leyline. Our mission is to build intelligent tools that make life easier for us humans here on Earth. One of the things, or a couple of the things that are making our lives a lot harder are how the world is becoming a lot less predictable very quickly. And a lot of organizations, some as old as a couple hundred years, are struggling to cope with things like accelerating climate change, rising social unrest, and events like COVID-19. So the reason why we're doing this now, or why I'm building this product now, is because this instability is only just beginning. And everyone over time is going to experience varying degrees of disruption. So people are going to want to pay for ways that will give them an edge in adapting to this new normal and managing their business processes as they try and steer a course through it. So I got here because when COVID-19 first started, I called up some of my connections, and I ended up supplying over 1,000 face shields to medical facilities across the United States. I also designed a mask for manufacturing using distributed manufacturing. And basically what I did was I set up a brand new product and a brand new supply chain right at the height of the early stages of the pandemic. And through all of that, I was doing it manually. I was doing phone calls and spreadsheets and task managers. And it was slow, it was cumbersome. So I figured, there had to be a better way of doing this. And I started to explore that. And so the solution I came up with was software that fixes supply chain problems for you. So how does it do that? Well, it does it in three stages. You create, simulate, and evolve. So in the creation stage, you're connecting your engineering directly with your supply chain management, so that if, for instance, there's a material shortage, like, hey, there's a disruption for aluminum, can we use steel instead? You can directly talk with your supply chain, your engineers and your designers to modify your design and update that through the entire supply chain and share that data out. I've also, within that, you're doing that within create an intuitive user experience using a node-based system, which I'll show a little bit later. And you're building user-specific processes. So that means that if you have, say, one company has a quoting mechanism that doesn't quite fit into your mechanism, you can build a process or an interface for them specifically to be able to modify and input that data so that you can digest it easily. Then once you've created the supply chain, you can simulate it. And so that pretty much means you have a digital twin that runs completely virtually. And you can say, like, what happens if there's a disruption here? What happens if there's a disruption there? And through our network of supply networks, it's basically like a social media sort of connection system. You can get second and third order warnings of potential disruptions before you even ship the first box. So like, if you know that you get your material from Tom and Tom gets his material from Sam, if Sam gets a disruption, you'll be warned ahead of time because you have that network of networking effect. And then you can test those sorts of disruptions using the simulation tools that are within the software to see how you should adapt your supply chain before the problem happens. And then lastly, you're evolving your supply chains. One of the big things is workflow and process automation. So you can run those simulations, set up a contingency plan, and then have that contingency plan auto-activate when you're ready, when something happens. In addition to that, you can use these sorts of techniques to understand the carbon impact or the energy usage of your entire supply chain. So you can say, hey, this one particular item is taking a lot of energy or outputting a lot of carbon to make. Can we have it go through a different system? And you can automate that as well. So kind of tying in with a little slide that I didn't touch on it too much, but using both the simulation and the evolution of your supply chain, you can test geographic disturbances. So for instance, in demand spikes, you can say like, hey, it's raining in Michigan. Can we put enough, can we produce enough stuff for that set period of time that it's raining? So enough umbrellas. Whereas with evolution, you can use that same strategy to say, hey, do we need to really design this new type of umbrella? We'll make a bunch of small production runs, see how it goes, and then we'll try it again, or we'll validate the idea that way. So the total addressable market is roughly $15 trillion. And the way we get to that number is our product is it's for managing disruption in your supply chain or disruption to manufacturing. So the total cost of all, different disruptions, climate change, unrest, and COVID from 2016 to 2020 was $85 trillion to the total global GDP for that same time period. Now, if we say that manufacturing is 17% of global GDP, then 17% of $85 trillion is $15 trillion. That is affected by, that is the cost of destabilizing conditions to just manufacturing. So the service addressable market is a little bit smaller. I chose the United States because I'm familiar with the market, and with 1,000 employees or less, because those companies are probably more willing to adapt a new system, and they probably don't have an existing business process. So if I take that amount, according to the U.S. Census, there's about 675,000 manufacturing companies, over 1.5 million, or almost 1.5 million retail companies. So all told, in the United States, companies with 1,000 employees or less, that's 2 million companies and $1 billion in payroll. So the service obtainable market out of all of that is 86. That if I take a 0.4% of those two markets, it gets me to around their average revenue of other startups within a similar space of about $4 million in 8,000 companies. So the business model is freemium, where advanced features will lock behind a paywall. It's subscription-based. By the end of year 2, if we look at a 34% growth rate and a conversion rate of 3%, we're looking at about $1 million from income from subscriptions alone. In addition to that, we have 2 other sources of revenue, which is data licensing, so licensing out our network of networks, and so people can get that data and use it for their own purposes, and then consulting, so kind of implementing the systems for companies. All told, feasibly speaking, we could be hitting $3 million of revenue by the end of year 2. Now, our growth model, compared to our competitors, is almost a little conservative. The average growth rate for several other companies within the space is around 41%. We're doing 34% for the same time period of 6 years. We're looking at about $7 million from subscriptions alone by the end of year 6. So the competitive landscape that we're facing, this slide is mostly just to show that we're combining features from 3 different product categories, which is supply chain management, product lifecycle management, and low-code development. And we're combining all of those into a new category called resiliency planning software, where we can kind of connect the entire spectrum of a product's lifecycle. So this is a little bit about some examples of the product. We don't have a working prototype yet, but these are the wireframes. It's all node-based, so you drag out a little node, and then you drag a line to another node, and that's how you create relationships. So this is the core of the product here. Now, in terms of creating, custom interfaces and custom forms, you could drag out a form node, and you can have both inputs going into that form, and you can also have outputs coming out of that form. And then finally, you also have the dashboard editor, which is basically same thing as the form editor, except now you can create these dashboards that you can share with your coworkers, or you can use to monitor your supply chain. The dashboard editor also functions very similarly to the simulation editor. It's basically the same thing, except the simulation is not running in real time. It's running when you press play. So the management team is myself. My background's in user experience, industrial design, distributed manufacturing, computer graphics, and a variety of other things. Fabio Brisson is kind of on as a consultant / mentor. He's a PhD mechanical engineer. He has collaborations with companies such as Ferrari, Maserati, SpaceX, NASA, the DoD, Virgin Group, a lot of different companies. He's lending his expertise to this project because he thinks it's a really good idea, and he thinks I'm really smart. So yeah. Our funding ask is $810,000 for a 1-year ramp in exchange for equity. Assuming a standard growth rate, we're looking at an ROI of in around 1.5 to 2 years. I personally think that this is going to be a billion-dollar business because, like I said, the supply disruptions are only beginning, and companies are going to need ways to adapt quickly. And this solution is the most revolutionary out there on the market for this problem. So happy to take any questions, and thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, great job, Jordan. Yeah, excellent presentation, and you've come sort of really long way from sort of reshaping this idea into everything you've built out today, and yeah, it's great to see. Exciting all around, and yeah, we have some questions already coming in. I'll ask you from the audience. Again, if anybody has any more, please submit them through the chat. But yeah, exciting presentation overall. Great job.
Thanks, Ben.